Mark, did you want to add something about beach walks, or is that for another day?
That's probably for another day.
Okay.
That's okay.
All right. And then a little, not much housekeeping to be done. Just to mention that we're transitioning to our new list of participants as soon as this meeting's over. And most people are on there. The exception, I think, is Tracy Hart. So I don't know if you want to continue with this, Tracy, if you want me to flip you over to that or not. And we can go from there. So Nancy, I think you're next up on the agenda.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nancy Sheehan from Journey North, UW Madison, Wisconsin Arboretum. I just have a quick public service announcement, really. One, I would love for those of you out there on various lakes across the country, if you feel so inclined, to submit your first sightings of loons this spring, please do so on Journey North. And then for those of you who are managing larger organizations, I have had the great opportunity to receive funding for another data manager this summer, a fellow student who will be working with me to kind of corral all Journey North data sets and publish it onto a central data repository. And so those of you who may be sitting on first arrival of common loons in the spring, sitting on data sets in your Excel sheet on your desktop somewhere, now's your chance to send that into Journey North, and working with this fellow this summer, I can upload it in the back end and hopefully include that into this published data set for the Journey North Common Loon migration project. So it's a great opportunity. Just wanted to let everybody know. And I guess I'll just put my email in the chat box and people can contact me directly if you have any questions.
I don't know if you saw that, Nancy, but I am asking our Canadian folks to send you the first sightings. I don't have much history I trust to send you because the loons get there before our people, but hopefully you'll get some good sightings out of this. Next on the agenda is John Cooley. Are you with us, John?
I see his name.
I am. I've got two screens here, so we'll see how this works. Because my audio is not working on my computer. So, and I think I'm just to briefly summarize the Northeast Loon Study Work Group meeting proceedings, right? And I think probably a lot of the folks on the call were attending the proceedings, but my thought in just a few minutes was to make sure that sort of the highlights of those meetings were on people's radar. If you want to go back, the meetings were recorded. And then just, offer my very brief commentary on how much citizen science was part of the NELSWIG content. So there were just so many different ways that the stuff we're doing with this working group is relevant to what's happening in the Northeast, that some of those seem to bear mentioning. So let me see if I can actually share my screen to share the agenda with you. Can folks see that NELSWIG agenda?
Yep.
Great. So there were 2 days. This is the first day. And as I said, like if anybody on the call or in the citizen science working group is curious about any of the individual presentations, you can go back and view the recordings of them. And I'd encourage that. But just at a glance, looking through this agenda, there were very obvious ways that the summaries that are always at the start of the Northeastern Loon monitoring emphasize the differences in how much citizen science is happening in the different programs. So we look at the 2021 numbers, and volunteers are playing a big part in that, in terms of how many loons we count. But then I specifically wanted to point out the talk that Lee Addix did on intruding loons or roaming loons, the unpaired loons or the floater population, and how in his work with citizen scientists in Maine, that's come up as a really big question now. And it speaks to the degree to which Lee, in working with citizen scientists, is fielding their concerns and their anecdotes and kind of grounding that in what like the formal or objective data shows in terms of how many intruding loons there are, how big a problem it is for the population. So there's that, navigating that difference between what, you know, anybody on their own lake says and or is seeing, and then what it overall it means for the population. But most of all for this group and what we've been working on this year, I think it's notable that in trying to quantify how many unpaired loons there are in a population or what their impact is on, say, breeding success on a lake, we really need some numbers. We can't just know that the loons got in a really huge ruckus of a fight last July and it caused the nest to fail on one lake. We have to be able to, across the lakes, come up with an index. And that's where I think in managing the citizen science observations, there's this huge opportunity to try and standardize, like, well, how do you quantify that? What's the method that you're using on your census form in July, besides just how many loons there were, to gauge how many loon intrusions there were? And some of us in our formal surveys, like Walter Piper, are already doing that carefully. Or say, Jay, if you're measuring, you know, the time activity budget of loons, you're going to catch that. But as we recruit volunteers to observe, we have to make sure there's a check mark that they can check off on their observation form that captures the intruding loon behavior, the territorial behavior. So that really came up with Lee's talk. Other places on the first day's agenda. If folks didn't get a chance to see it, I would highly recommend Bill Evans' talk on fall migration in the Finger Lakes. That was just an incredible profile of a sit-sci effort that started in the 90s and then was reprised, 20 years on, where people on Cayuga Lake were tracking fall migration, and they did it very thoroughly and carefully, and then decades later came back and redid it. So it was cool. And I think Nancy's introductory mention of the Journey North sightings speaks for itself. It was wonderful to have that be part of, and timely to have it be part of NELSWIG. But my interest here with that, Nancy, is the sort of mechanical question of how we can best streamline somebody's reporting to Journey North and their email to us. We've gotten a few emails already this last couple of weeks about loons showing up, and the question for each of our programs is really like, is there a way? Should we be entering the data? Should we be logging in a spreadsheet that we send you? Should we just direct them to you in your website and hope that they are willing to take that 5 minutes as well as the 5 minutes to email us? How do we make sure that that's just as streamlined as possible? So good questions like that. I'll keep going, but the health and death section of the NELSWIG agenda, I just wanted to, again, I always say this, but the sit-sci part of that is just how phenomenally comprehensive our collection efforts have become in terms of how many loon mortalities we are collecting of all the ones we'd expect to happen. We're probably collecting about a third and examining about a third the loon mortalities in New Hampshire, and that for a free-ranging wildlife species, that's just phenomenal. And likewise, we're hearing about these stranded loons. So with the ice rescue and egg portions, we're collecting eggs and hearing about stranded loons through the SITSI effort too. And that's what I have this picture of here from the ice skaters who found loons on Winnipesaukee. And you can see that they even sent a track of their ice skating trip to show, where the ice was solid. So just incredible information we're getting. I think that's probably where I should stop. I do have the second day's agenda there. Again, if anybody wasn't at Nelswig, I guess what I'll do is put the agenda in the SITSI folder, the shared folder for people's reference as an index. And then if you realize that there's a topic you're interested in, but the second day also, with almost every presentation, emphasized the importance of citizen science in what's happening in the Northeast, and there were a few specific places where, again, sort of the mechanics of the reporting jumped out, like with Jim's interest in fireworks and loons. What we've run into time and time again is not just getting the anecdote from volunteers on the lake, but finding a way to recruit systematic observation from citizen scientists with this sort of secondary piece of data that's not just how many loons did you have on the lake, but how were they affected by fireworks. It's hard to translate the anecdote. So I feel like that's kind of what we're working on with this working group. But I'll pause there in case people have questions about Nelswig, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I will stop. I had a few more slides, but the B120, I would say the B120 restoration work that's underway in the Northeast, and the discussion of that at Nelswig also really underscore the partnerships that are happening between the sort of professional effort of the Loon staff and programs and the legion of lake associations and volunteers who are out there who in a lot of the restoration work are going to be doing the lion's share of the work. So that was especially true with, I feel like with Maine's, the Maine Audubon work. And so there were some just incredible maps of all the lakes in Maine where the restoration work may happen, and how much the partners are involved. Are there questions about Northeast Loon Study Work Group from the group here?
John, did we have a protocol that either came from Lee or maybe Walter in terms of observing the behavior of loons from the time they first arrive on the lake and their interaction with those floater or intruder extra loons?
Dana, we have a very limited way of capturing that right now on our formal surveys that our field crew is doing, as well as on the volunteer forms. And I would say I'll share my screen here, and you'll be able to see that on the volunteer form, we allow for folks in summarizing the season to indicate if there were transient individuals, if there was a resident unpaired adult, and that's an important distinction, and then if there was a territorial pair. But we don't typically try and have them sort out, or categorize territorial behavior like an intruding loon fighting with a resident territory holder. So we're not asking people to do that level of recording.
I would commend to the group Walter Piper's presentation that he had, where he showed in videos the interactions between loons, particularly the resident payer and the intruder, and what constituted from his videos aggressive behavior. And I'm concerned because we don't have people out on the lakes, either because they're not there as summer, quote unquote, summer residents in March or April. And we don't have, in the case of LPC, paid summer biologists there until the third week of May. So we have probably 7 weeks or so of behavior on the lakes that is not getting captured by any of those current methods that we have. And I'm working on proposing for you, John, a citizen science effort where we can use bird watchers. They have good equipment, telescopes, binoculars, cameras, and they may have time. And of course, some of our loons are banded. They can easily, with that equipment and a bit of time, pick up banded loons. So I think we have a real opportunity here to add more citizen science to that period of the loon returning cycle that we may be able to use with some different methods. And I think we just want to be sure that we have the protocol for what we ask them to do and observe.
Those seem like good points, Dana. Thank you. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. And I think going back to what John was saying about the citizen science discussions in Nelswig, there's a lot of areas in which we have ephemeral data, like the fireworks stuff that Jim talked about, that we need to find better ways to collect. And another one, of course, that Sue Gallo talked about at the Nelswig meeting was the boat interactions, you know, where we've all experienced, I think, problems with, you know, either, I mean, almost any kind of boat, power boats, wakeboards, motorboats, jet skis, everything else. But the data in most cases aren't being collected in a systematic way that we can use it and use it to affect policy change.
I found Susan's comments about their attempts to get some sort of a handle on wakes and boats quite frightening in terms of the resistance of the boat industry also to their efforts.
Well, you know, to be realistic but somewhat cynical, I think that anytime we've run into situations where there's an industry that has a profit motive attached, and this could be, you know, lead fishing gear, it could be boats, it could be, you know, I mean, back in the DDT days, you know, lead in gasoline, all kinds of things. Where there's a profit motive attached, it's very difficult to make those changes, and you have to have good science and good data and good observations and a lot of public support to change things.
Amen.
I wouldn't mind commenting on that. It's a very interesting item in a newsletter I recently saw from the Canadian boating industry, and how they are recommending that their people in the industry manage better wake ethics versus leaving it for legislation. So we may be rattling a few good chains right now.
Good.
That's
That's
good.
really good to hear, Kathy. If you see anything like that, could you circulate that? Because I haven't seen much of it down here.
Okay, I will make a note to circulate that.
Thank you.
And that's a industrial newsletter.
Okay.
Great.
Was there anything else, John, or are we good on that topic?
No, thanks. That's, yeah, I just want to make sure people had the agenda. I'll get it in the Google Drive, and according to the chat, I'll also get our volunteer forms in there too, if they aren't already. And
Okay.
Caroline or I can work on that. So thanks.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Mark, it's over to you for an update on Loon Rescue.
Okay. And I just want to do this relatively briefly but as we've got 3 working committees at this point, I think it's important to have those 3 working groups have some knowledge of what's going on amongst them. And there are several of us who are on multiple working groups, but basically for the last several months, the Rescue and Rehabilitation Working Group has had a very narrow focus. We decided back in the fall that we had a lot of information that we had amassed on best practices for rescuing loons, transporting loons, and rehabilitating loons from people all over the US and Canada. And I think we've shared that information in our Google folders, and people have learned a lot from it. And then we decided we wanted to do outreach. We wanted to get back to the community of wildlife rehabilitators around the US and Canada who encounter these. And so we spent, what, Jay, most of November, December, January, and February the national meeting of wildlife rehabilitators was the first week in March in Madison, Wisconsin this year. Next year, it'll be in Delaware. And we put together a half-day symposium on rescue and rehabilitation of loons. And so the working group put together 3 PowerPoints, and one on basic biology of loons, and Jay took really the lead on that and did a marvelous job. One on transport that Marge Gibson and the Grenzers and some other people from Wisconsin took the lead on. And one on loon rehabilitation that Becky Dewar from California and Heather Barron from Florida and Diane Wynn from Maine, a very cross-continental effort put together. And they were presented on the 5th of March. We had about 100 people in attendance. It was extremely successful. The Q&A went almost an hour, and they wanted it to go longer. Couple of points we learned on that is that the vast majority of rehabilitators don't see loons very often and consequently know very little about their biology. A whole bunch of them didn't know loons couldn't stand and walk, which is a little disturbing. Yeah, I saw Erica's eyes there. These are licensed wildlife rehabilitators in various states. We also found that a lot depended on the nature of presentation. These are rehabilitators. And what they wanted to know is how to do the hands-on stuff, the medical and the fluids and all that kind of thing. And we got, and Marge in particular, Marge Gibson and Becky Dewar did most of the presentations. Our 3rd presenter had COVID and I had to pull out at the last minute, Shelley Spanswick. And so Marge and Becky took over. And what we found is, even though we had put together this wonderful presentation on basic loon biology, a lot of the rehabilitators weren't particularly interested. They said, don't tell us the biology, tell us how to, do this. And so we weren't meeting them where they were at. And I think we learned a lesson there in that we still want them to know the basic biology, but we have to present it through the lens of what the rehabilitators are interested in. And so that was a useful learning tool. We now have those presentations in our Google folders. If anybody would like access to them, let us know. The next meeting of the Rescue and Rehabilitation Group is April 18th at 5 o'clock. Everybody's welcome. Again, it's not an exclusive group. So if you want to come or let anybody, if you know anybody who'd like to participate, let us know. The other thing we did, and we sort of wanted to copy this group, the Citizen Science Working Group. I love the way that this group has put together a steering committee. And so the Rescue and Rehab group followed up on that and put together a steering committee. We currently have 5 people on that. I'm on it, Jay is on that, Diane Wynn from Maine, Maria Passarelli from Florida, Nina Schock from New York, and we have asked Becky Dewar from California to be on it. We haven't heard back yet. None of the Canadians said yes, but we'll keep working to get a Canadian rep on there. But at least we've had a modest number of Canadian rehabilitators in on them and veterinarians in on the meetings. So the group is growing. I think the next thing that will be happening is the steering committee meeting is going to be meeting to talk about, okay, we have done this national rehabilitators meeting. What are our next set of goals? One of the clear sets of goals is to, now that we've got the show, take it on the road. There are a number of other big national or international wildlife rehabilitators meetings coming up. The Florida one next winter is probably the biggest one on the Gulf Coast. Several hundred rehabilitators attend that, and they see a lot of loons in Florida. So we're already intending to attend that meeting and participate. And we'll see from there, but recommendations are always welcome. So it's an active group. People are out there wanting to, make change, positive change, and we'll see where we go from here. But, again, you're all invited to participate or refer people who would like to join us. Jay, did I miss anything important?
Sound good, Mark?
Thanks.
Well done.
Hey, Mark, I have
Hey.
a question. Pertaining to avian flu, I think there's a lot of our citizen scientists who would like to know, what to look out for when it comes to loons. What are the symptoms? Are they just going to be dead on the shore or
The short answer is, in terms of loons, no one has a clue.
Okay.
The clinical signs, I have been on probably 20 Zooms in the last 3 weeks in the
Wow.
United States and in Europe. The Europeans are dealing with they're in their second year of this avian influenza outbreak. If you look at the history of, this is high pathogenic avian influenza. Low path is around all the time. We've taken samples from loons in New England, and we can find low path avian influenza in 20 or 30% of the loons anytime you sample them. It's circulating through the population. As far as I know, there are no clinical sequelae. With high path avian influenza, I don't know of a single case that's ever been documented in a loon. That said, I don't know everything there is to know. And most dead loons have not been tested. So there's just a paucity of information out there. The way that birds respond to this is really very species specific. Waterfowl, ducks, geese, swans often show no clinical signs at all. They're carriers. And so they can be shedding vast amounts of virus and look perfectly fine. Is that always true? No. We had a flock of 100 Canada geese in New Hampshire about 2 weeks ago that died of high path avian influenza. And they died acutely. They were fine one day and they were dead the next day.
Wow, 100.
About 100, más o menos. They didn't test all 100, but they were all in a tight flock. In Europe, they say it's sort of leveling off at waterfowl. It's going from epidemic to endemic, and they're worried about it becoming an annual cycle. They're saying that 40% of the bar-headed geese in the world have died from this in the last 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a small population to start with, but everybody's worried about it. What they're seeing in Europe at the moment is an explosion in birds of prey. And I must say, on the East Coast, the first report of a bald eagle dying of avian influenza was, I think, and Kathy, you may correct me, I think in Nova Scotia, about 8 weeks ago, something like that. But
I remember seeing something about the East Coast. Was that in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick?
right.
Yeah.
And I would say after that, the next reports were in North Carolina. We have adult eagles and chicks dying on the nest in the mid-Atlantic states right at the moment. We've had several bald eagles in Maine dying, and they're coming in. It looks like lead poisoning.
Okay.
They're weak, they're droopy, they've got neurologic signs are very common with this disease. And so if you see birds with neurologic signs, that should be a high index of suspicion, but it ain't a guarantee. And so we're seeing everything from acute death to neurologic signs to just ain't doing well kinds of birds. And it's the waterfowl, the other taxon of birds that seem to be able to carry the disease without dying from it are shorebirds. And so migratory shorebirds are something that everybody's watching out for now as just transmitting the disease on during migration. So we will be testing loons. University of New Hampshire is very actively working on this. And what we're talking about now from the rehab and rescue group is, this is a potential human pathogen. There haven't been, with the current outbreak, any serious cases in people. To my knowledge, there's 6 or 8 cases in Europe, all of which are like flu. They're all mildly clinical. But H5N1, which is this variety of influenza virus, has pandemic potential. If it should mutate, it can become very serious very fast.
Oh my God.
Thinking of this, it's probably not a bad idea to do a bit more detail in the meeting on that. Arlene has a question, and I'll get to Arlene in a second. But I was just mentioning that Doug and I have been talking about messaging for our volunteers. We've decided to let them know that don't touch dead birds, call a professional is the way that we decide to handle it, versus having 600 people out there grabbing birds.
Yeah.
But let's switch it over to Arlene. Arlene, I'm going to unmute you. Oh, I guess you have to unmute yourself, and go ahead with your question.
Arlene, we're not hearing you.
Yes, you're muted at the moment. There you go.
I'm all set, actually. I hit the wrong button. I'm just listening mostly. So
Okay, that's fine.
Anyway.
I do that all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, this issue about
yeah, it's amazing when somebody listens. Anyway, okay, thanks a lot for so we're all set. I'm not I don't have my hand up anymore.
Okay, I'll put your hand down and
Okay,
right.
put my hand down. Okay.
No, I must
Thank
say at Nelswig we had a moderately lengthy discussion about this, because I think that people who are rescuing, and not just loons, rescuing anything at this point, or bird banders or field biologists who are going to be capturing birds to take blood samples or banding them, all are going to have to be very careful on how we approach things. And currently, the different states and the different agencies are making contradictory and confusing recommendations on this. Florida has become very strict with wildlife rehabilitators. For instance, they have told all the wildlife rehabilitators in Florida, if the bird has neurologic signs, it can't come into your facility, it has to be euthanized.
Wow.
Period. And I should say in Florida, they're seeing a lot of avian influenza killing pelicans. So we're outside of some of the typical taxa at this point.
Is there anything that can be done for birds with influenza? Is there any treatment?
Clinically, if you get in the flu vaccines, that's what you use for people, would be Tamiflu or something of that nature. But no one wants to use the antivirals in wildlife at this point, unless they're critically endangered species. If you had, for instance, California condors, one of the problems with the antivirals is most of the viruses develop resistance to them really fast. And so if we start using Tamiflu on animals that are going to get released to the wild, we may release resistant virus, which terrifies all the public health people.
Yeah.
So the veterinary committee of the National Wildlife Rehabilitators Association has recently come out with a policy recommendation that antivirals should not be used on wildlife, period.
Wow.
But
Even endangered.
Well, again, endangered is different, particularly if they're in captivity and so forth. The issue is really prevention. A lot of zoos have brought their birds indoors.
Right.
Or have, completely enclosed them. You don't want them to have any exposure to wild birds, because this can be transmitted by any body fluids, feces, saliva, urates, blood, anything at all. And one of the problems with the avian influenza virus is, COVID is a fairly sensitive virus. We're all familiar with that. On surfaces, it doesn't last a whole long time, or in sunlight. Avian influenza is a tough virus. If you have it on a counter or on your boots or on your banding equipment, it's going to last for weeks to months. And so you've got to do either really good disinfection or have separate sets of equipment for everything you're doing. And so when I've been talking to the pasturine banders at this point, I've been saying, if you're using those cloth bags, you know, to hold your pasturines in, you got to have a zillion of them. You got to have a separate one for every bird and they have to be laundered at the end of every day.
So like hot water.
Hot water and soap,
detergent.
you know, a little bleach, something like that will kill it just fine. It's easy to kill with disinfectants, thank goodness.
Okay.
But, you know, for people going out in the field, and Eric and I have talked about this, and John and I have talked about this. I mean, when you're thinking about the stuff, you know, you're going to have to wear boots that you can scrub off between sites. You're going to have to disinfect your nets, probably your kayaks, probably your trucks, you know, all these sorts of things. Now, what we're hoping, now that's the alarmist perspective, you know, if you look at the last 4 outbreaks of high path avian influenza, it comes around roughly every 5 years. We get a cycle going through North America. And it almost always disappears by summer. As the weather warms up and we get to the end of migration, it usually disappears. And that's what everybody's expecting to happen this year. And that was true until I talked to the Brits last week, where it didn't disappear last summer. It went entirely through the summer. They're now in their 2nd straight year of the outbreak. And they don't know why. You know, is it a different virus? Is it climate change? So there's so much we don't know about this. And the recommendations are literally changing twice a week.
Wow.
So I can't keep up with it.
I just want, I'm actually putting together a workshop in a couple of weeks and just want these facts for folks too. So that this is so helpful, Mark. Maybe I can put together something and send it to you for fact checking.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is I can send around the URLs for some of the webinars. University of Minnesota Raptor Center did an excellent webinar just a couple of weeks ago. It's a little out of date already, but it's really good. And there's another one I just heard about today that, you know, but it requires a spare hour here and an hour and a half there and all this kind of stuff. So I think, you know, we're thinking of prevention, we're thinking of disinfection. If I were to go, I've got, you know, veterinary students who are going to be out in the summer and we hope necropsying loons. We're still on the fence about that, you know. It may be that when they're necropsying loons this summer, they're going to have to put on hazmat suits, you know, Tyvek suits, high boots, double gloves, face shields, maybe positive pressure respiration, or it may be that we'll be fine, you know, just with good gloves and a N95 mask. You know, we don't know yet. And what the wildlife agencies are saying is different than what the public health agencies are saying, is different than what the agricultural agencies are saying. You know, the big issue in this from the regulatory perspective is poultry.
Right.
I mean, this has already cost in the United States and Canada more than $1 billion in terms of the numbers of chickens and turkeys and domestic ducks that have been slaughtered and incinerated or buried. The price of eggs and chicken is going up every 30 seconds on this continent. So we hope this dissipates by summer because it's a little scary.
Have the Brits noticed, have they done any gene sequencing? Are there more variants that are coming out on this, or does that seem to be the same too?
Let me plead ignorance. I was not talking to that group. My guess is they have. I mean, there are so many people at so many institutions in Great Britain doing this. I can find out for you if you want to know. I'm sure it's been done.
So we should probably move on, or Eric won't have
Yeah,
much
yeah.
time.
I'm sorry to take so much.
No, this is really important stuff, and I think it's on everybody's radar. If you don't mind sharing those links, Mark, because when I looked for them the other day, I could not find the Minnesota one. It kind of got lost in the Minnesota website. Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions about this before we move on?
Yeah. The only thing I would say, Kathy, just take one more minute. If somebody called me this afternoon and said they found a dead loon, I wouldn't tell them. I mean, if I thought that this was a mature adult who would listen to instructions, I wouldn't tell him not to pick it up. I would say, wear rubber boots that you can disinfect, wear gloves, wear a K95. The metaphor I use is it's like picking up dog shit. Take a plastic bag, invert it, pick it up through the bag, close the bag, seal it well, put it in a second bag, disinfect the outside of the second bag, disinfect your boots, throw away the gloves. So I would have them be really cautious, but I wouldn't have them be totally paranoid.
Okay. And now I got distracted totally. Did I just see turkeys walking by your back window there?
Oh yeah, lots of them. Yeah, the males are going crazy displaying right at the moment. Yeah.
I have to, I'm a birder, right? So, all right, I'll keep that in mind. It's tough. I don't know what the CCWHC is going to take this year.
No,
so
I don't
I'm
even.
gonna have to play it by ear until we hear from them. I'm sure I will eventually hear from them.
Yeah, I was talking to the folks at Guelph, and they're trying to. The problem is that it's an issue in the eastern provinces at the moment, and it's a totally non-issue, west of Ontario. So yeah.
So, any other questions on that topic, guys, before we move on? Oh, Brian has a question.
Mark, since this seems to recur every 5 years or so, do we have any data from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago on how it has affected loons?
No.
Okay.
Has it always been the very virulent kind every 5 years, or is it?
Well, the low path stuff is here all the time. 100% of the time you can find low path avian influenza. It's the more pathogenic that appears in this odd, 4, 5, 6 years. It just sweeps through. And there's a lot of epidemiology about that. A lot of this comes out of Asia and migratory waterfowl. There's a lot of papers on Lake Qingji in Western China. We could talk about that another time. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Perfect. I guess now, Erica, the stage is all yours.
I'm going to share screen here, and
You have those rights.
Thank you.
Let me just figure out how to get to the rights there.
Let me.
It looks like you might. Oh, there are multiple. Okay, try now.
Okay, I'm trying to find my PowerPoint. Oh, there it is.
I'm
blind. Okay.
So you now have control of everything.
Ooh, it's very exciting. Okay, so for those of you who weren't here at the last meeting, I was talking about putting together a fact sheet that we all can agree on how to help protect loons. And so because the reason for this is numerous, and it would be really helpful if we all put this together. The reason is because we've had so much increased numbers of visitation, tourists and people coming to live in the northern parts of the United States and Canada, and there have been some negative loon interactions. And so, as I've said before, this is a tangible takeaway that we can provide for people. I'm always surprised that people don't know the basic loon and wildlife facts and how to interact, how to have good loon etiquette. And so that makes this especially important. So things like lit tackle, keeping a distance, habitat enhancement. And I see so many light bulbs go off when I'm giving a presentation or workshops, or when I'm at an event and handing out a sheet like this. And so I know that we are having intangible results. So people are picking up this information and they're running with it, because I almost always have folks call me or email me with more questions. And so I'm always curious how many people I'm reaching. It's impossible to know, but and how many people are changing their behavior because of this. So I think this fact sheet that we put together has an impact to have sort of a widespread impact, and especially with all of our organizations backing it. Let me move this around. And so, yeah, so what they don't know, what folks don't know can possibly hurt loons. Okay. So a Help Protect Loons fact sheet. We're going to target, our constituency, our Loon Rangers, our Loon enthusiasts, so our volunteers, our lake residents and educators, but there's a lot of other organizations and businesses and companies that we can target that are really impactful of folks having interactions with loons. And so collectively, as this group of North American Loon citizen science organizations, we are representing thousands of folks. And so that's pretty powerful, that when we have this fact sheet that we're all backing up, that's pretty powerful. Together we have a stronger voice. And then we can lend credence to this by providing our logos and our representation by handing out this as a collective group, our citizen science working group. So distribution can be at in-person events, mail, email, PDFs, social media, use your imagination and let me know what else you think we can do to distribute these fact sheets. And so I just want to show you some examples of fact sheets. So I asked for folks to contribute their fact sheets. This is Loon Watch's fact sheet, which I feel could be greatly improved. And I was so excited to receive other fact sheets too. This is from Journey North, from Nancy's organization. And so this is not really a fact sheet, except that it's like a ton of fact sheets. So it's not necessarily on Help Protect Loons. Some of it is, there's quite a bit, but it's every single every single thing that you click on is sort of like a website fact sheet. And then some of them are facts, are frequently asked questions too. I especially appreciate J. Mager's Loon Studies, Yodel Studies. So there's a lot of information that is on this fact sheet in particular. And then what I really, really like is Birds Canada fact sheet. I love how it's organized. It keeps it simple, and there are these subtitles, so how you can help protect loons. And so what I did was try and do a combination of all of these and organize it in the way that Birds Canada did. And I always like to, when I'm talking with a group or individuals, sort of define what things are, why it's important, so that's the issues, and then what you can do to help. So keep it simple and keep it so that the layperson can understand. So this is what I've put together. And now I need your help. So we may have some barriers to having a common fact sheet, potentially geography, culture, the number of lakes, and our program capacity. So I want you all, I'm going to give this to Kathy or put it on the shared Google Drive. And I want you all to take a look at this fact sheet. And so this is your homework. You all have homework now. Read through and comment on the content. Is there anything that you've read that needs to be changed? Don't be shy. I like to know what each group is thinking and if this is going to work for them or not, because we want to have as many of our organizations collectively back this fact sheet as possible. So this is going to help make a great fact sheet. So, what do you think needs to be changed? Why do you think it needs to be changed? These are what I'm looking for, the information from you that I'm looking for. And then please, if something needs to be changed, provide an alternative. And if there's anything else that you think needs to be changed, do you not like how that's organized? Do you think that something better can be done? This is a draft. This is a first attempt at putting together something that everyone can agree on. So I think we're going to go through probably many iterations of this. And not everyone needs to agree, but it would be great if we did. So continental backing, would be powerful. Having all the groups across the continent back this would be great. But it's possible that a specific region or a certain size of organization might be best suited to develop their own Help Protect Loons fact sheet. We'll find that out as we go through this process. And we all need to participate to make sure that we're developing something that the majority of us agrees on and that we will use. So that's that's it. Does anyone have any questions? I think basically you're going to need to look at what I've created. Does anyone have any questions or ideas or suggestions or comments so far? This is it. Yeah.
I have one. You're gonna drop that on the Google Drive so people can comment on it. I'm wondering if people here need a quick lesson on how to comment in Google Drive. Are we all confident with that? Or you're just gonna email Erica with your ideas?
Email me.
Email you is better for Erica. Okay, then email Erica. I think it's a great start. I wanted to mention to folks to remember that it is a fact sheet, so we can't information overload unless you do literally what Nancy does and have it online and you can have the drop downs, which we can't do on paper. And it would also be nice if people have the capacity to have a translation in at least one other language within their group.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be really nice to see it in Spanish, in English, in French, and I suspect I'm going to have to commit to that one, but I'm not sure. As well as to see it in other less official languages that are increasing in population in our urban centers and in our cottage communities.
That's a great suggestion, Kathy. Thank you. I'm going to need help. But I think once we have something that we agree on that we want to produce, then let's work on that. No.
Then we do that.
Yeah.
Any comments, anybody? Oh, Sheila.
Yeah, I have a question. Erica, I was wondering if you could also post that Canadian fact sheet you had.
That's in the Google Drive as well.
Okay, great. Because I just wanted to kind of compare the two.
Yeah, and then what would be great is if I could get some more fact sheets that you all have. If any other organizations have their Help Protect Loons fact sheets, that would be great. So we can, make sure that we're covered. And I totally, again, thank you, Kathy. I want it to be, a one sheet. So it would be like a front to back printing. That would be pretty much, I think, as much as people would want to absorb or look at. So. Yep.
And I know how difficult it is to get in Loon information in that one page because we have French on the one side, English on the other. But I was going to ask you, Erica, maybe you could drop your slide deck in there as well. That way they have the things you want us to deliver on. Though that one page that tells us what you're asking for.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Anybody else? Did you still have a question, Sheila? Or the hands just stopped?
I have a quick comment.
That was all.
Okay. Eric?
Yeah. Just thinking of, the handouts for the presentations to have, while you're out, at your centers, to hand out to people, to give to volunteers for them to hand out to people. That's one major way, but I think it's also more and more of lake associations I'm finding are willing to, have a little thing on their websites. So thinking of a web-based, handout, whether, it could be a PDF, but it could also be something that's a little more, maybe a little more information that like that, where you have your headers, they then go to another little page that maybe they can, adapt to each of their websites. That makes it a little more engaging and interesting. So thinking of multiple levels of communication. And then just for fun, when I was in grad school at Minnesota, I took a natural history sort of interpretation course. And when someone comes up to a display or looks at a handout, the average person really spends 6 or 7 seconds looking at it. So having those headers that just grab you with 3 or 4 messages in big bold, and then you get a segment of the population that'll then read for 20 or 30 seconds.
Right.
So what's that next level of information? And then it's rare that you're going to get someone who's going to go beyond much of that, unless it's my wife. But no.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we're putting a lot of icons in our work, but that takes up space, right? So you have to choose, what do you want?
Oh, it's challenging.
It's challenging, and you should have at least 12-point font, if not bigger, with modern day old folks like some of us.
Great. I agree, and I'm looking forward to receiving your homework and and yeah, hearing what you think. Maybe I was probably a bit verbose on these, but this is a good time to, we have time to correct and to make new versions.
And I wouldn't necessarily just have a 1 or 2 page version. It may be that you can have a handout that's a mini packet pamphlet that's 7 or 8, 9 pages.
Yeah.
That is just another level of information for those who want it. The renters, that sits on a coffee table that people could page through when they're sitting at a home, or to the volunteers who are definitely already more committed, they could get the more detailed information. So again, don't throw out the other stuff that's like, oh, we just can't include it. We'll figure out maybe there's another way we can include it.
Erica, John has a really good question here. Time frame. When do you want your responses by next meeting, or do you want?
I would like them by the next meeting. I don't know if I can be on the agenda. I'm not sure who is up, but I think I could probably condense everything by that time.
I don't know who's up. Does anybody know who's up for the next meeting? That's probably in the list somewhere.
Yeah, next meeting would be great. I think that's the short answer.
So when's the assignment due, Erica?
By the next meeting, Jay.
Oh, okay, so but don't you want some time to collate, or do you want? You want probably want some time in between. Or do you want to have next session? Next session could be starting to ask questions or things that come up. That's always something too that we could iron out. But my guess is you probably want some preliminary answers within maybe a 2-week period that you can.
Yeah, 2 weeks would be good.
Okay.
All right, then we will set a date for April 11th. Jay, do you remember what our next meeting was, or hadn't we decided? Maybe Nancy remembers.
I mean, I'm sure it's the last Monday of the month, but what the content was, I'm not sure.
Yeah, isn't it the April 25th? That's what I've got on my calendar.
Yeah.
That sounds right, but it's just a topic. We'll have to come back to everybody on the topic, I think. We promise there will be a meeting on April 25th, and it will include some time for Erica. Is there, now, Sheila, your hand is still up. Is that just left over, or did you still have a question?
Sorry, that's just left over. Sorry.
Oh, Erica, by the way, you're still host, so I can't change anything.
I'm still what?
Host.
Oh, how do I not do that?
You go to your name, or you go to my name and you give it back to me, or you can give it to Mark, or whoever you want to hand the talking stick over to.
Talking stick.
Not it.
No.
I don't know how to do this, Kathy.
Go
Where
to
do I
my
find that?
name. Go to my
Yep.
name, and there should be more. And you
Upper
click on
right-hand
more,
corner.
and
I'm
it should
finding your-
say make
Where's your name?
host. Probably because I'm talking at the very top, but I don't know.
You disappear when I put my cursor over your name.
Do you see in the upper right-hand corner, if you move your cursor up there, there's 3 little dots that appear?
Oh, never
I see
mind.
that.
I can actually reclaim
Nice.
host. Now, this is what you call the blind leading the blind, isn't it? I reclaim the host.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. Oh, yes.
We have lots of stuff, and we have some actions, and I'm just going to go through those. And we're actually at a good time here. So John's going to send us the agenda for now, so I can put it in the city science folder, as well as the data forums if they're not already there. I'm going to share the marine news item that I received. Mark has already completed his actions and dropped all those webinars in the chat, and I've grabbed them. Erica will put the slide deck on the folder and the fact sheet in the Google Drive as well. And that is it. Am I missing any action items, guys?
Do we want to talk at all? Does anybody have agenda points for next meeting?
That's a fair thing. Anybody have something they would like to include in the next meeting?
Well, let me bring up one because Kathy, you asked it at the beginning, and that's whether we wanted to talk about beach bird survey stuff. And what made me think about that is I see Natasha Bartolotta, however you pronounce that, Natasha, on the call.
Bartolotta.
Okay, thank you. And Natasha is working on an iNaturalist app for beach bird reporting. And there's a whole bunch of us talking in other venues about what's out there. And Kathy and I exchanged an email earlier about some things that are going on in Canada. And so rather than prolong this today, I'd say maybe this is a good chance for all of us to put our heads together and talk about this whole concept and what's going on for next month.
And then we have silence.
Natasha, is that okay with you? I'm sort of volunteering you to participate.
Yeah, so next month we would talk about the idea and what progress we have so far.
I think so, and talk about, you know, what other things are going on. I mean, there's discussions that, you know, that you've been in on email discussions with the AMBC people and things like that. And so, yeah.
It doesn't have to be long, Natasha. It can be 10 minutes. It can be 20, whatever works for you.
Okay, yeah, that would work to do a brief talk of the progress we have. Yeah.
All right. Anything else that you guys think we should have on the agenda? Jay, what about working towards our standard protocol? Do we have anything we should share on that you're aware of, or?
You mean in terms of gathering productivity data?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm definitely open to talking about that and expanding, you know, some of the discussions we've had prior, or maybe there are talking points that people have thought about from those previous discussions that they would want to, you know, discuss further before we start talking about that type of thing. But yeah, definitely something we could start thinking about is how can we put our data sets together, and, you know, how do our measures of productivity sort of align, and whether it's something that we could do, which means big data. And so maybe even talking that, you know, Nancy and her big data experiences could be very interesting, and Kathy's big data experiences.
That might be something to touch base with the research sub-working group on. I think they're trying to do the same thing. I might have missed their last meeting, but I know that was the topic of either their first or second meeting, was kind of standardizing the data that we're collecting across the species range.
Yeah, it is on their radar too. I know that. I don't sit in on it, but I hear the results of it. Doug Tozer sits on those ones. So if you want to, maybe since this is the most, it's the best in your head right now, Jay, maybe you could send us a couple bullet points that I can drop into the agenda for next week so that people can think about and discuss it before we walk into the meeting.
Sure. And I know that the other working group, I don't know when the next time they're going to meet is. They don't meet, you know, monthly yet. So I don't know. I think they were thinking a couple months away. So
if you guys ever want to see a demo of the system that we use, which is a fairly big data system, I'm happy to share it with you. We have some newer ones. I'll send you guys some links around about the new app that is moving forward, but I don't see it being for the Loon survey for at least another 2 years. We're not a priority. There's no money for our program to make it a priority for programming. But I'm happy to share that anytime if anybody wants to see it.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, guys? Are we actually going to finish early?
I was just going to ask, since I missed most of the meetings over the winter, is there any summary of some of those data gathering and, you know, which factors to it, you know, discussion of which ones to do it, how to do it? I mean, I heard some of the initial stuff back in the fall, but didn't see where I didn't see where it came out to be.
Well, the problem is none of us are really great at notes, but there is some notes in the on the folders, and there's also the Zoom meetings are there. I think they're all uploaded.
Okay, I can go to the Zoom meetings and review them and scan through them.
Do you have any notes to share other than the little wee bits that I put up, Jay?
Well, yeah, I even talked to John Cooley or Vince Bagnuolo, you know, who talked about lake occupation and nesting success. I could speak to the fledgling success, maybe just in general. I think we found that a lot of people monitor loon productivity by looking at, you know, 6-week-old chicks as sort of the bellwether for fledging. And, you know, one of the concerns that we kind of had was that, you know, are the chicks actually going to be developed at that point? And so one of the things that we thought about adding to our data gathering is not just a date as to how old the chicks are, but even maybe a categorical check this box with a set of pictures, Eric, you know, that could indicate chicks that have gone through that second molting or in that juvenile plumage. There's a lot of ways to measure reproductive success, but that 6 weeks appears to be sort of the consensus if we can get it. And then going to hatching success, that's a little bit different story. But you know, most of those big papers that have been published sort of in terms of loons in the different regions have always, you know, looked at the total number of chicks per nesting or per territorial pair. And that seems to be the same standard I guess a lot of people are interested in, but we can expand it for sure.
And
Yeah, we don't have to
maybe
go
right
into the
now-
details right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to talk to you. You know, shoot me a line or send me an email, Eric. We can talk.
Okay, well, I guess we should head out. I will make sure the recording ends up on the server, on the Google Drive. And if we have no remaining correct questions, I guess it's time to say goodnight to everybody.
Great to see you all. Thank you.
Bye,
see
guys.
everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Erica.
No problem.
It's rocking.